Welcome to the Jeremiah Show.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Say Stacey Kent. You just heard Stacey Kent. She jumped in before I could even introduce her. She's ready to go. She's in New York City. Let me introduce you real quick, Stacey. It's such an honor to have you on the show. Thank you for doing this. I know you're in New York City, performing at Birdland Jazz Club, and with our good friend Johnny Valente. So let me just set up why you are here and the music. We're playing your music from your new album this entire show. So for the listeners out there on the radio, on the podcast, that you get quite a treat today with the show. So I've been thinking about you all week and the show, and having Stacey Kent on the show. What a great honor. And what do you say about a musician when nearly every adjective has been used already? When every big descriptive word in all languages have already been written to describe her. How do I honor such a guest without recycling words that come easy and are immediate? So I thought about this a lot. And then the most simple answer came to me just about 15 minutes ago. It's simple. You don't. You just listen to the music. I don't need words. You don't need words. You feel it. You feel the way everyone who has ever described her feels when they hear her voice. And then to me, there are no needs for words. It's beautiful music. Stacey Kent is a jazz singer in the mold of the greats, with a legion of fans worldwide, a host of honors and awards, including a Grammy nomination, album sales in excess of 2 million, and platinum, double gold, and gold selling albums that have reached a series of number one positions during the span of her career. Her album, Songs from Other Places, is a varied and eclectic collection of voice and piano duets, and it is out now. It was released on September 17th by Candid Records. And we've got Stacey Kent here to talk all about it. Stacey, welcome to the show. I promise this will not set the tone of my questioning, but I am curious. So I'll get into better questions after this one. But you're in New York City. You're playing a few nights at Birdland Jazz Club. Those are probably late nights. I can imagine a Birdland, great nights, great talking to everybody, all your fans afterwards, which I hear you stay after, sign CDs, albums, and talk to everybody quite a bit after the show. But I'm just curious about this. Do female jazz musicians sleep as late as male jazz musicians?
I wish that I could sleep a little later. It's funny. First of all, it depends on the tour and it depends on the circumstance. Because, and I don't mind this question at all, because I like the squishy human stuff. It's all the good stuff to talk about. There's the on stage thing, and then there's just life, because we're just human beings on the road trying to adjust to a daily cycle, a 24-hour cycle that's a little bit unconventional, because you do hang out late and your adrenaline is going because you're working late. I would say this probably is the same for anybody who does any kind of work that's late. It doesn't have to just be on stage work. It's just that you're revved. And so to go to bed and go to sleep is not easy. And yet I love waking up early in the morning. And it's funny because we're coming out of this whole period of being off for 20 months. And we're so used to going to bed so early and waking up so early. Because where we live was so glorious for the sunrise. That was such a show in the morning. We didn't miss that. So we were up in the dark and then would watch the sunrise. So I have to accustom myself to this whole new schedule. So I'm waking up so early and going to sleep so late, and that's tough. I don't know about other male jazz musicians, or indeed, I don't really talk about this with any of my other friends, to be honest with you, now that I think about it. But Jim and I wake up early. He's male and I'm female. We're on the same schedule, which is very nice because we hang out together. Um, but the brief answer is we don't get nearly enough sleep. We're on the road. We want to leave the club. We don't do what some of the others do, which is, you do hang out at the club afterwards because I do want to talk to the fans because this is so human what we do, make music and share music. I mean, it's all of those things that you mentioned in the introduction. It's hard to describe the feeling. It is just this human feeling and visceral experience, and you want to just be in amongst other people, and people have so much to say to us about the way in which the music makes them feel, and we just end up in great conversation. It lasts a really long time. Even when you don't want it to, you can't help, you just get embroiled. Then the fellas will go off to some other spot, maybe across the street there will be another bar. And life goes on for them. Jim and I come back to the hotel and try and get some sleep because that's better for, all of this. So, all these components are fun to talk about. And they're especially fun to talk about right now because we have been off the road so long. And so we're back to doing what we do, which is at the same time, absolutely normal. We walk into Birdland and there was Johnny and the whole staff still there who we knew from, all these years that we've been there. Mm-hmm. And we just walked in as if there was just this freeze in time, and we're picking up where we left off. And then there's on the other side of this coin, just the absolute weirdness of it. Oh my God, it's a first for everything all over again. Being in the dressing room, talking to the guys behind the bar, ordering dinner, doing the sound check, talking to the soundman. All these things are so fresh again. So I have a lot to say on this subject because it's just, it doesn't feel norm and par four right now.
Well, I'm glad that you do have a lot to say because I just think I have this, I've never been to Birdland, believe it or not, but I have this vision and this, this picture in my head of almost a place stuck in time or lost in time. But when you walk in, it's a magic, it's music and laughter and clinking glasses and smiles and great jazz moments and music moments that probably don't repeat themselves very often. Every night's a new night. And I just feel like it's almost this magical cinematic, you step into a movie set or something, take you back in time. And I love the descriptions, and I love the descriptions from your perspective. And that's such a neat way to describe it, that everything's the first time again, or everything's new. That's a neat perspective.
But I like your perspective too. You're absolutely right. It is magical in there. I mean, I'm loving the fact that our first dates back are there. We're going to France directly after this, and we start to do a little bit of touring. Not much yet because it's very hard to cross borders. It's complicated out there still. But we're doing a few things. But the fact that we started here is so meaningful because that magical place that you're describing is right on the nose. It's not old-fashioned, but it's timeless, and it is a frozen moment in time. You're on the planet, you're here, you're grounded. We talk about sort of normal quotidian things, and yet at the same time, you're somewhere else. We're suspended in a time and a place, and I don't know how that really sounds, but when you walk in there, that's what it feels like the world has stopped and it's just you. I suppose you would liken that to, meeting the love of your life or somebody you're quite, drawn to for the first time, and everything just kind of stops. The way they do, and it is cinematic, the way they do in a film, when two people come together and suddenly the music that was at the forefront, is just pushed to the background, and the people who were more visual are now just a blur, and it's just those two people. And that's what it's like. I don't know how many people go into Birdland, how many, doesn't matter about the capacity, but however many hundreds of us, that's what it's like for all of us together. Everything. And we just go voyaging, just go soaring together into these songs. And yeah, it's magic in there. So, and Johnny runs great club. I mean, the fact that the same staff is there year after year is real proof, is real testament of the love and the passion in there, that the team and the family stay together. And we come in as these family members who don't quite live here, but we come in twice a year. And the fans who we meet, so many people come in. Sometimes they're for the first time, but sometimes there are people who've been seeing here for 15 years. You know?
Right.
So we don't know them, but that stops at a moment in time, right? I saw this woman last night. Her name is Doreen. I have not seen her anywhere else in the world except in that vestibule of Birdland. But we're like old friends. We pick up where we've left off. We don't know much about each other from outside of those four walls. But there we're two friends. We talk about the music, we talk about other little things, and then we go our separate ways, and then we come back. Those things are very meaningful. They're really special.
Yeah, it's so neat that you see people year after year there that you've seen only there. When the world is, I mean, there's so many things that are uncertain or unknown, things that we counted on that have gone away or that we've been surprised weren't as solid as we thought they were. It's nice to know that Birdland is there and that when you step through those doors, it all falls away and there are those traditions that have been going since 1949. I love the description. Johnny, I talked to him this morning and told him that we were going to talk. And I said, and then the texts just start coming one after another about how much he loves you. So I said, can I quote you, Johnny, in a couple of these things? He says that she's a great, beautiful, loving, kind person, one of the best that you will ever meet. We love her at Birdland. She's a true professional that the audience just adores. And he wishes he could book you every day of the week. So if you like it there, you might be able to stay. And then he told me a little bit that after every show, rather than going home or going away, or you stay and you meet your fans and you hang out with them and take pictures and sign albums. And he said, there's never been a night that you have not done that. Two more things. I got to put them all in here because they're so nice. And he said you could not meet a more grateful and a gracious person. You also have, in his opinion, the voice of an angel. And I think that's a shared opinion worldwide. So I wanted to go back. I know you're on a journey now, not only with music, but with a new album, Songs from Other Places. And I know that you're on this journey probably with your husband, I would imagine, and your dear friend and pianist, Art Hirahara. I want to make sure I get that right? Okay. But if you don't mind, I want to, there's a neat quote here about Art from you, that you guys have played together for longer than you've played with any other musician, with the obvious exception of your husband, Jim. You say we have literally grown up together in music, and now despite being trapped in our respective other places of Colorado and New York and separated by the continental divide, we are able to journey together through these musical meetings. So Songs from Other Places, the new album includes interpretations of songs by Paul Simon, which is American Tune, Lennon and McCarthy, Blackbird, Stevie Nicks, Landslide, as well as Gershwin, Wheel, and Joachim. And so you said in that quote, and the reason I brought up that quote, magical meetings, that popped out to me. the differences. You're in different locations, but you're making music together, and these are magical meetings. And over the 400 and something shows we've done, I'm always trying to describe music and figure out what is that. And I thought that was a great definition of music worldwide, because it defines music for the listeners anywhere in the world. I mean, somebody hears a Stacey Kent song in Colorado or Paris or Portugal or wherever they happen to be, Santa Barbara, and it's a magical meeting. Do you agree with that? I mean, that your music does that, and that music does that in general?
Music definitely does that in general. You know, it still makes me kind of teary that I can channel the little kid that I was, who had no idea what was going on technically, harmonically. I didn't know anything about music. I wasn't studied. I was just a little kid. Kids are amazing around music because they just react in the most pure form and human way, because they're not caught up in anything else. And when I was a little kid, when my mother would put on music, my parents, there was a lot of music in the house, not necessarily jazz. In fact, there was a lot of classical music in the house. So I grew up on Maria Callas, and we didn't grow up far from here. So we would go to the Met and go hear music. And my mom played the piano, and I would sit under the piano and listen to the Chopin, because I was completely gripped by all of the harmonics and all of the things that were going on in that space, sitting on this carpet and just being, you know, in this cave of sound. And my reaction was so powerful. And I didn't know at that point, I didn't know till way later that I would become a musician. I don't come from a family of musicians, so there was never a question of becoming a musician. It just wasn't something we did. And yet, and it's not even like I had a dream to be a musician. I had a dream to just be in music. I just reacted to it. And you watch kids, you know, anybody listening today, you don't have to be in music or even go to shows to know this. Everybody's been to a family party or a wedding, and, you know, watch people interact, and they're communicating, they're saying hello to cousins and stuff, but watch the kids. The kids always gravitate right to the band, don't they? And they dance around, or they just sway, or they impersonate the drummer, or whatever it is. The thing about musicians is they maybe keep more of a slice of that for good. It's permanent in them than somebody else. It's very hard for us to turn music off, which isn't always, by the way, I might take a little beeline to say something else here, but that's not always a good thing. When you're walking onto a plane and they're piping in music as you go to get your seat, it's actually irksome. That's not where you want your music sometimes, but I can't turn it off. Musicians can't turn it off. If there's music playing, you will hear it, and that's not necessarily where you want it. So there's, I don't want to say that's the downside, because, you know, that's such a tiny, nothing of a detail. It's just to say that you're constantly attuned to it. But to return to that little kid, this kid that I was in the cave, music without knowing what was going on technically was just magic. It was magic because it made you feel something that you couldn't quite understand. It transported you to a place that you couldn't quite understand. But everybody can kind of get this, or most people can get it, because let's say you're driving in your car and a song comes on, and it reminds you of something that you experienced elsewhere. And so you have a relationship to that song like no other, because it becomes like that Proustian rush, right? You suddenly, you know, for people who've read Proust or just know the reference, you know, he takes the bite of the Madeleine of the cookie, and it takes him to, you know, to back to his earlier days. It's like that. So it'll take you back to the time that you might have gone to visit a relative where it was hot and rainy, and the smell of the tarmac after the rain had a particular scent. I mean, this is what I mean about those visceral sensations. when you can hear a song that actually taps into other sensations within you, not just the memory of, oh yeah, I was driving with, you know, Juliet that day. It was, wow, it smelled that way after the rain. So these are the magical meetings that we're talking about. That's a kind of a long way of explaining it, but you never lose, I think you don't lose that relationship to it. The kid who experienced these feelings for the first time. And that's it. That's why now we understand more what's going on technically. We know what it is about a particular song or a particular bar or a particular component in a song that pulls us, right? You know, so Jim and I'll talk to one another, and we're sitting at the piano and we're talking about, you know, we love this song, and don't you love how it jumps to this sixth here? You don't think in those terms, except when you're putting the music together. You just let it wash over you and you feel a particular way on account of it. And that's the magic.
What a beautiful description of that magic. You know, you made me think about the, you know, the smell of wet cement or tar or oil. But I remember, so I started thinking about music. One of the first memories of music was we had a cabin in Montana, and my parent, I remember this vividly. It was a Fleetwood Mac song. I'm not off of the Rumors album. I don't remember what it was, which one it was exactly, but I do remember the music. And I remember sitting as a little kid looking at the album cover, and it was after dinner. And so you could smell, it was warm and there were candles lit and everybody was happy. I just remember that and that music from that album and sitting there just staring at that cover. And that's incredible. I must have been, you know, 4 or 5, something. But yeah, I remember it, you know, and that's what you're describing. It's just so incredible, that magical meeting for sure. I was reading this story about how despite everyone being locked down over the last 1.5 to 2 years, there hasn't actually been a big baby boom coming out of that actually, in fact, less babies have been born. And I thought that was so kind of an incredible fact. And then I started thinking, if I had to guess where these, because I talked to a lot of musicians on the show, and I started guessing, and everybody says they have this incredible. First, there was a fear and I can't perform and I can't do what I do, and then what I started to hear was that there's this incredible almost birth of music, that artists found this creative streak and they just wrote for days and created music. And I thought maybe that's where all the babies went. They're music babies. I think that music creation has flourished during the pandemic. And do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for everybody, we were all in the same big boat, and then there were different compartments, and people reacted differently at different times because it was long. We had the length of it, and so I would say it was more of a ride. It was not definitely an even trajectory. I mean, for us, from our own experience and talking to our friends who are musicians, people had dips where they felt lost, you know, and we did too. We still went to work every day. I mean, we were pretty disciplined about what it was that we needed to achieve just to kind of feel okay, you know. But sometimes Jim and I would talk about that. Sometimes it felt like we were going through the motions because it was just something we had to do, and yet we knew that we had to keep the discipline in order just to hang in there. But you know, that's the mixture of what you do mixed with the kind of personality you are, right?
Yeah.
Other people were, you know, super creative. Our friend Joycey, she wrote a book. She was writing music. This is Joyce Moreno. Different people were reacting in different ways. And then maybe in the middle there was a dip, and then came out, you know. I think to go back to the baby thing, you know, I'm no expert here. I would have thought maybe something like that happened because there was a lot of fear and there's a lot of trepidation and people aren't quite sure, you know, how the world's going to be. And so maybe they were just thinking in a more cautious way. maybe this isn't the best time to start a family or have a family. But I do think you're right that people, and even people who weren't musicians, were looking to channel their creativity in different ways. So I have friends, for example, who, musicians and non-musicians, who are doing things like, my friend David, the architect, he said, oh, I've started baking bread. He never baked bread in his life, and now he's baking bread, and he brought bread over. Friend Sarah, who was making kombucha. You know, people started doing different things because they could at the house. So I think you're right that people were looking for different ways to channel their creativity. For us, we know, and I'm not going to be coy about this. I mean, the things that you said about me and kind of making people feel good, I love that. And I love hearing that. And I love knowing that. It's really good to know, because that's what I feel like I'm on the planet to do. And so my mission during this lockdown was to, of course, take care of myself and my loved one and be okay. But also we had a mission, which was to create music that we knew would satisfy us and be out there to help people, not through this time because we were making it for, you know, the thereafter, but that we know would be there for people. I met a gentleman last night at Birdland who said lockdown happened. The timing was rough for him because lockdown happened for him and he was still in New York. He lives with his boyfriend from Germany, but his boyfriend happened to be away in Germany at the time of the lockdown, and they were separated, couldn't get back to each other for months. And so the loneliness set in and it was immense. And the fact that they come to hear us play and it triggers those feelings all over again, and they wanted to share it with me after the show, is also so meaningful. And one of them said, I spent the entire lockdown listening to Know I Dream, my previous album, the orchestral album. He said, I spent the whole lockdown with I Know I Dream and you and your 58 musicians, and I got through the pandemic thanks to you and that record. And my God, that's, of course, I think about what I do as a musician, and I'm still looking to grow as a musician. I'm not the singer that I would like to be eventually. I still go to my voice lessons. I still work on certain things that, you know, bug me, that I want to be better. And Jim and I are still looking around trying to find music. And we did so much of that during the pandemic, and it was great and fulfilling. But if my job in the end, when I'm not having my best night or whatever the situation may be with me and myself as a musician, if I know that I'm making somebody feel good and they can leave that magical setting of, let's say right now, Birdland or next week in France, then I can feel pretty darn good about my job and what it is that I do, that I helped a man get through the pandemic. And hear stories all the time like this. It never makes me feel complacent, ever. Then I think, okay, I have a job to do. And that's what we did during Songs from Other Places during the lockdown. We thought, okay, let's make this album that isn't about the pandemic. In a more oblique way, it is. Because it was about the voyage and what travel does for you, both literally and metaphorically. If I may say, and I hope I'm not making this answer too long, just to be specific about one particular song, all the songs have that relationship to the travel, to being in another place, to the free fall feeling of being maybe a little bit vulnerable, a little bit out of your comfort zone. You don't quite, in the Tomlinson Ishiguro song, Craigie Byrne, you don't quite know where she, the protagonist, is or what happened to her. It's something. But that means that if it's left in that kind of vague way, anybody can interpret it how they need to interpret it at that particular moment. There's another song, Les Voyages, by Raymond Levesque, a Canadian composer, which is literally about travel, but it can be literal or metaphorical. You go away, you experience something, and when you come home to your own four walls, it is inevitable. You will never see it that same way again, because your eyes and your soul is affected by something else that you've gained from being out in this other experience. And so we were looking for material that made you feel that way, but we weren't dictating what it was that you needed to feel. It was left very open. And that made us feel really good about what we were doing during the pandemic. So that was another long-winded way of saying, yes, we felt very creative during the period.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just one straight line or one line up. It was definitely a roller coaster of a time.
You're so professional, understanding the audience, understanding that in a way you have a job to do, and that your gift and the music that you bring to the world has helped so many in so many different times and probably nights and days that people have had struggles and difficulty, ways that you'll never know about. And they hear your music and it changes that mood, a switch, and takes them on another path. What an incredible feeling that must be to know that that's out there, to hear these personal stories. And although you look at it like a job because that you're professional and you understand the weight of the responsibility, it's also music and art and what you fell in love with as a child and still love today at this moment. Do you enjoy, are there moments when you go, okay, I actually really, even though I'm here to bring the music and bring the performance, are there moments during those performances where all of a sudden you go, oh, I'm also having a lot of fun?
Oh, definitely. All of those things. I mean, you're in your moment and you're in your zone, but there's a giddiness that comes with it. Not necessarily that you express it by giggling out loud, although that happens too. And you can kind of break the spell too by just, it is intertwined with so much emotion. And that does include silliness and giddiness, because I have to constantly refer to that childhood feeling, because it just makes you feel, like the little kid who runs faster than they can handle, just so they don't fall, right? But they're just running. And it's almost like a flight, but you're almost going to lose it. I mean, that's kind of what it's like. I think that must be even more intense for somebody, some of the most supreme singers that I can think of, who are my heroes, and they are many. It's a very long list of heroes, from João Gilberto to Elis Regina to Barbra Streisand. When Barbra Streisand was a young woman who started to sing, and she just opened her mouth and that came out, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of think that she just almost must have gone, whoa, like it was an out-of-body experience, because, nobody can do that, right? When Barbra Streisand is singing in Funny Girl, and I want to cry when I think about this, it is so off the chart exhilarating. I think she must have shocked the daylights out of herself. Do you know what I mean? And she's also, it's everything about it. It's all the components. It's the orchestration of those songs, because that was a hell of an orchestra, right? And the whole, from start to finish, the production is just, out of this world. But she herself is one human being who is able to do that. When I reference the kid running, I think of Barbara, because it's not even human what she can do, and she was doing this as a kid, really. Anyway, those kind of experiences you have on stage for sure. And then afterwards, when you talk to people, people are so grateful to me, and they say, thank you for your time. And I want to say, and I do say back to them, no, you have no idea what fuel you give me. It's such a privilege to hear these people's stories. And some of them are delightful and delicious, and some of them are really dark. I mean, there was the gentleman from the pandemic who was lonely, and there's a lot of loneliness, and there are people who lose their loved ones. And there's the woman who said to me, I just spent 90 minutes with you and you made me forget that I have cancer. And that's just killer. And then there's the stuff, I'll tell you one tiny little beautiful moment to give just the reverse. There was a young man who came in, a young father.
There's beauty in that though, too, I
There
think.
is beauty in that, but it's, it's all of it, and we're getting all of it. I mean, it's overwhelming what we get. And it is such a privilege, I want to say again, to know, and this is why I have this job to do, because we know that we are fuel for them and they in turn are fuel for us. It is not us playing to them. I mean, it's all of us in that room together. I might be the one singing, but we are definitely on this thing as a group. I am very aware of the gathered group. So there's this one guy, I love this so much. And I'll just try and tell this quickly, but he came to the show and then he wrote me on one of my social media pages. It showed up on Facebook. He wrote me a private message and he gave me this whole description. It was really at length about how when he got home from the show, he didn't bring his daughter because he thought she might be too young, but she was a big fan. And he picked her up on the couch because she didn't want to go to bed. Her babysitter wanted to put her to bed and she refused to go to bed because she wanted to be there when her parents got back from my show. So she fell asleep on the couch and he picked her up and she woke up. I can't remember what the song was and it doesn't really matter, but he's giving this beautiful description. I mean, it's like reading a book, right? She's on his shoulder and she lifts her head and she looks at her dad and she said, "Did she sing whatever the song was?" And he says, "Yes." And she puts her head back down and she falls asleep and he puts her to bed. The fact that I got to read this novella of this little moment in time in this couple, this dad and his little girl's life, is extraordinary. You know, I mean, of course that stuff is going to affect me and the kind of music that I make. So when I talked about Barbara and the out-of-body experience, and I don't sing like Barbara Streisand, I have what I have and I work with the gift that I have. And so there's the side of me that just wants to grow into the better singer and to aspire to that, technically. But then there's the side, the human side, which is this out-of-body experience. I am just this vessel. I sing and I transport them to this place. And then they take it and they run with it. And it goes into their lives. And it's no longer mine. It's no longer me. And so I'm aware of those two sides. There's my ego side, my own side. And then there's the side where I am there to transmit whatever I can transmit.
Oh my God! What I could sit here and such great insight and such great conversation. We're talking with Stacey Kent. Her new album is Songs from Other Places. She's a jazz singer, but she's so much more. As you're learning, as I'm learning today, this is such a great conversation. You can find her on Instagram at staceykentofficial, on Facebook at Stacey Kent, and on staceykent.com. She's playing at Birdland. So if you get the podcast this week, you can go check her out at Birdland if you're in New York City. We're going to take you to break right now with music from her new album, and I Wish I Could Go Traveling Again. Play back. Wow. You actually teared me up a little bit there, and that's never I'm gonna, excuse me 1 second. I just noticed my laptop is about to die. I'm gonna grab the cord real quick. And then you got a few more minutes for us?
Absolutely. And I'll take a drink too. I'm right here. I'm right here.
Perfect.
Thanks, Jim. Would that be funny if I went back with a massage? No, I'm good. I just wanted that little drink. That's good.
Good. Well, I have so many questions for you, but I think this is even better. I almost think I should just throw them out, and then maybe you can tell me about the album because we don't have much time left.
I can make them quicker answers for the particular questions if there are certain things you want to ask. Absolutely, because now we're just chatting.
and it's really fun. But if you want to get down to specifics, I can just be more sound bitey.
I think you learn more by and hear more by just listening, and I really think I wouldn't want you to change anything that you do or you're feeling right now, because I think it's really good, really a good conversation. So we'll get a couple in, and then but I definitely want to get into, you talking about the album a little bit and giving credit where you want to give credit and all that. So with that, some of my line of questioning was about jazz music. If we have a time, I'll ask a couple of them. Okay, so here we come. We're coming back. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to my show. My special guest today is Stacey Kent. She is a jazz singer. She is, like I said, going to break so much more, though, and we're having a really great conversation. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. Her new album is Songs from Other Places, released on Candid Records in September 2021. Stacey is in New York City performing at Birdland 2 or 3 nights, I believe. And first time you've been in Colorado all of this time. You have not performed, Stacey. You told me offline that you had not performed for a year and a half or so, 20 months.
20 months.
And you walked into Birdland and you saw all the same people. What was it like when you stepped on the stage and looked out with your band behind you and the new album and seeing all these familiar, friendly faces? Johnny Valente, the owner of Birdland. What was that like, though, from that perspective of the stage, and kind of rush did that give you?
It was really a rush. My heart was beating fast and just filled, just swelling, Birdland is actually 5 nights. It's always a 5-night run, and it's 2 shows a night. So it's 10 shows in the 5. And we always do 2 runs a year. So when I was here, we play basically a summer show and a winter show. And when we were here in December 2019, they said, hey, everybody, see you in June. Because we were booked for the June, and then June came, and obviously we didn't do it. And then the December came, and then the following June came, and we still didn't do it. And now we've walked in September. It's a different time of year than we usually do, but that's no matter. We just needed to come back when it was time to come back. But to walk out on that stage with that ringing in my ear, hey, everybody. And by the way, fans who came in this week, who've come in so far, because we've got 2 more nights. Is it Friday today?
Yeah.
We've got 2 more nights. We've done 3 so far. Plenty of fans have reminded me of that moment where I said, I do my usual at the end of the night over the vamp with the band playing, see you in 6 months. And they said, remember when you said see you in 6 months? Well, that was the last show I saw. There was that kind of thing. So when I stood out there and I was watching the staff, start to walk around from table to table, putting the napkins and the tablecloths out, etc. And we were setting up, and the sound man was there, and Johnny was doing his thing, walking back and forth. And we just kept beaming at each other. He would walk by and we were just grinning. And I mean, that is a feeling. So now we're back. We're in 3 days after 20 months, and it will normalize. But those first feelings of being back in September 2021 will stay with me for the rest of my life. We never could have anticipated anything like this in our lifetime at all. And so, it's something you can prepare for. You might talk about those kind of things in the abstract, but it's nothing you can actually prepare for. And to be shut down like that. And yes, we were in Colorado the entire time. And where we live is pretty remote. So we weren't in a city where we were, getting to the market and really seeing that many people anyway. We chose a remote lifestyle because that suits us. From when we're off the road, we like to live and work in real, wildish kind of country with, deer and bear and coyote and this kind of thing. Lots of birds and stuff. So we were cut off, and it was great. But it meant coming back for us was maybe more shocking than somebody else who's used to living in a more populated place, because we just weren't used to people, seeing actual people. It was a strange feeling. But
I'll treasure that for the rest of my life. Jim and I just looked at each other. He was setting up his percussion table, I remember, and we just looked at each other. And then I looked, because Art was here and Jim was there. And the three of us had been working via internet for songs from other places all through the year. But here we were in the same space at the rehearsal and the sound check. And I mean, I'm giving you the details, but the feeling is hard to describe. And I hope that that's conveyed in how I'm describing it. We just smiled a lot. I mean, I'm smiling.
Do you agree that jazz, I know it's a hard, I mean, it's like, how do you describe that? You got to be there, you got to be me. But I just, I pictured you guys living in that rural existence and then going to New York City and then Birdland, and then just the music, what you love is back, and you are there, and you're present. And to me, jazz music more than anything really defines being present. Would you agree with that? Because the moments move. A really good jazz performance is kind of like magic, like we talked about. You blend this cohesive performance between the players, and then they do their thing, and it's improvised. It's a dance. It's give and take. Musicians are each musician is appreciated and able to express their personality through their personal skills, but it requires you're present as the audience. Do you agree with that?
I think that's true, but I certainly don't think it's exclusive to jazz. I mean, yes, there's the component of improvisation, but I think that if we were to go down to Brazil and Brazil is a huge country with a huge amount of different kinds of musics, I think you would get that same sort of present sensation. Or here in the USA, in folk music, I think you would experience the same sort of thing. Or in blues, you would experience the same sort of thing. I mean, I think just in terms of that component of the presence, maybe you wouldn't feel it. I don't even know if I can say this. I'm really talking off the top of my head. If you went to a show where it was very tight and very scripted, maybe it would have its own extraordinariness and wonderfulness, but it might not have that component that you're talking about. But I do think that there are other musics where you get that feeling that I think you're describing, if I'm interpreting it correctly, because of the dialogue between musicians. But it's not just in jazz that you have a dialogue, because I can say, you mentioned American Tune, for example, which is this great Paul Simon song, and we played that. We're not in that same genre, but we cross borders outside of our genre. And when we're playing that, and it's a piece without improvisation, as much as maybe another piece, we still get that same sensation, which is why I think, what you're saying is true, but I just think it's got a grayer border.
Yeah, no, I know. I see that. I probably didn't describe it right. I worked my first job was at a jazz club on the beach here in Santa Barbara, and it was jazz 7 nights a week. And I don't think it ever made any money because the owner was a jazz musician, and his Patty Boyd, she was a jazz musician on the East Coast, and her son Terry Briggs, and they came out and they opened this little jazz club. It was open air, right on the sand. 7 jazz musicians. Most people drank coffee and sat there and watched them all night. So there was no real big dinner crowd, but I watched them. I was a server and a busboy, and I would watch these musicians and the same musicians on different nights, 7 nights a week, and it was never the same show twice. And it was always, it just felt like it was interactive with an audience, and you were present just because you wanted to see where they would go as musicians on that particular evening. But do you think is it conscious, unconscious? Is there this unspoken dialogue between musicians aside from knowing does that happen with you?
Absolutely. I mean, dialogue is one of my favorite words to describe it, because in the same way that we'll dialogue, in the same way that you and I'll have a conversation, and I might tell you, I just told you a couple of stories, right? And I've told you a story that maybe I'll tell Johnny or somebody across the street later tonight. And it might be the same story. But because of what time of the day it is and what's happened to me that has changed my particular mood, and it might be subtle, but whatever it is, or the confinements of the time we've got, or the acoustic, or whatever circumstances are, and the most important thing, what they say to me that then in turn makes me tell the story a little bit differently. These are subtle differences, same story, but it's going to shift. And that's exactly how it is on the stage. So you can be telling the same story, but because of your mood and because of the atmosphere in the room, and all those little infinitesimal details, it's going to feed into what we're doing. And so we'll react to it differently. And so it is constantly different. And when you ask me, is it conscious? Absolutely not. In the same way that I'm not going to go to the club tonight and tell the story and think, oh, well, I have to tell it a different way. It just will inevitably happen. Anybody who sits down with a few people in one day or in the span of a week and something's happened to them and they tell the story, they're never going to, that's all they need to do as the test of this, right? That they know that they're not consciously telling it differently. But of course, the volume of their voice will change. The way they tell you one particular part, the intense part of the story might be the crux of it and they want to hang on to that. But, it's fluid, right? Conversation is fluid. And I would say that when we're up there, it's the fluidity. So last night, I was between Jim and Art, because it's just the three of us. It's a very intimate show that we're doing. This is a really intimate album, which was a dream of mine, by the way. And I hope that we do talk about that too.
And please say hi to Jim. I know he's off camera there.
Here,
You're
he's got the Guardian open and he's doing a crossword puzzle. Little tiny things are happening. And so, yes, they are a little dance because he moves there and you move there and he moves there. And it's about being able to move quickly, react quickly in the same way you do in a conversation. We're not thinking about how we're going to react to one another at all. It's so natural. And that's what you hope to achieve. And when you play with musicians with whom you have great chemistry, musicians can get together and play with people they don't know. You know the same chord structure and, off you go. And then you'll lock in and you just have a look because you've just locked in and it just feels good. But here I am between two guys that I've known a long time. I've got great dialogue. And we made this record. And by the way, we made this record in a very unusual way. We made this record in an unusual way because we couldn't be together. Now, under normal circumstances, we would get in a studio and we would record. Because of lockdown, it froze. See that?
Oh, you froze on me. Are you still there?
Yeah. Are we back? You're back.
Okay.
You froze, so I stopped talking.
Yeah, okay.
I'll try that again if I can. I don't know what happened. We recorded this album, Songs from Other Places, in an unusual way because normally when we're going to make a record, we'll find a studio and we'll go into the studio. For this one, Art was here in New York. Jim and I were living out in Colorado, so we couldn't be together. But I said to Jim, when we were planning this next record, we were actually recording another record in December 2019 to put out now, which is done, but we put it on the back burner. It's going to come out next year called Summer Me, Winter Me, but we'll talk about that later. We put a halt on there because Art and I have wanted to make a duet record for years because of that great dialogue. People think that you aspire to bigger and bigger and bigger projects all the time. That would be the natural path of things.
And where do you go next, right? Journalists are always asking me, where are you going to go next? What are you doing? Because we had made a record, which was with 58 musicians. We made an orchestral record, last record. What were we going to do next? And we just laughed and said, well, of course, the next one is my duet record, right? Duet records are dreams come true for singers. If you find a musician a pianist with whom you lock in like that, or guitarist, it doesn't really matter what the musician is, but what the player is, an instrument. But Art and I have such a good lock. The person with whom I was going to best make a record during lockdown, because of that innate sense of one another, was going to be Art Hirahara. And Jim was producing, and Jim knows us so well, and Jim is such a good producer anyway. I mean, he knew how to just bring us together. So Art was playing parts and sending them over via internet, and I'm singing them. And then I would sometimes sing a cappella and send it to him, and he would play to my voice. So we couldn't play live because we don't have that kind of good, amazing bandwidth to be playing live at the same time. It just doesn't work. Where we live, we have terrible internet. But so we were sending each other files. But I close my eyes, and there's no way I, as one of the performers, can feel like we're in two different rooms. Absolutely not. So this was a great record to make during lockdown. But I wanted to say that because we didn't just make this record because it was an easy thing to do during lockdown to be just a duet. We have been talking about this for years because some of my favorite records were made by people who are orchestral singers and big band singers, but who came together in a very, very small and intimate, bare, all exposed kind of way. Being that exposed is really exhilarating and wonderful. And it just makes everything very open, and it's just you two. It's so pure. Anyway, Tony Bennett made that great album with Bill Evans. It's just funny, the two of them. And Tony's this, big band singer and orchestral singer. Same thing with Doris Day and Andre Previn, right? Doris is a big band singer, and well, she's a lot of things, but Andre too. They're used to the orchestral world, and it's truly just like that. Also, the Alan Broadbent, Irene Krall records. There are two of those that are on Candid, actually. And when you get that, you don't feel like do we love our band? We love our band. We love playing as the quintet, all of us. Right? And Art's part of that, and Jim is part of that. But to just do this for a little while, for that little moment in time, none of it was missed. It's totally full and rich for us. And it's just a different sonic experience. But it also meant we could be more open about the repertoire. Because some of these things work as just the two of us that maybe some of them translate great as the quintet or even the orchestra. And some of them are just kind of our thing. Yeah. Or this particular arrangement. The arrangements, Jim arranged everything except for Blackbird was Art's. But the two of them, the arrangements are just
beautiful. They're beautiful.
Jim is such a good arranger because he takes the song and he never, ever loses sight of the song. Sometimes arrangements can be over-arranged. I kind of think of it in terms of architecture when they talk about, like in mid-century modern architecture, and they talk about bringing the outdoor in and the indoor out. And, it might sound kind of cliche, but it's actually based on something real. What you want to do is build your home in the surroundings, right? You want to get the materials on the outside of your house to blend with whether you live in Virginia or Colorado or Brazil or Arizona, right? You want to make it work so that you're locking with Mother Nature. Excuse me. And Jim does that with the song. The song is so front and center, and he's aware of his surroundings at all times. And so he knows just when to embellish, just when to leave. Never overdo, never underdo. I think he just gets these arrangements just right. And I think also because he writes some of the songs. Some of them are already written compositions and some of them are his compositions. But he's always thinking about the arrangement. And he judges it in the most perfect way. And Art did with Blackbird as well. And so I'm really proud of the material and the way in which we put the album together. We loved it.
You should be proud. I was listening this morning in my office, and the time came close for you and I to talk. And I'm like, oh, I got to turn the music off. And I didn't want to. I'm like, oh no, I wonder if she would hear it if it was in the background. Well, we are going to play Blackbird in its entirety right now. And we have to say goodbye. I know I could have this conversation with you all day until you had to go to work tonight at Birdland.
Me too.
Are you you're such a great storyteller. Do you tell stories in between songs? I've got to see you perform, but is there a little bit of that with your shows? Because I think you're such a fascinating storyteller musically and, in your life. Does that happen?
Absolutely. I mean, I try and just let it flow and be natural. I don't want to talk all the time because I want people to, in the same way that we're arranging that way, the spaces between the songs, in the same way that the spaces between the notes are so important to allow the listener to have their time to go on their own inner journey, right? And so if I keep breaking it up, then it kind of might break the spell. So I try and judge it right because it's very personal what's going on between us and the audience. And at the same time, you want to just get on a flow so that people can close their eyes and go somewhere. So, I try and judge that right. Sometimes I judge it just right. Sometimes I judge it less right. I'm going to be honest with you here because it's a chance to be honest about these kind of things. When I'm more tired, sometimes fatigue will come into it. The fatigue doesn't necessarily hurt my singing, but it can hurt my talking in that, I will be less succinct or just not get my timing just right if I'm a little sloppy because I'm without the focus, because that stamina of the concentration in order to put on the show, because it's not a scripted show, is really important. But what's fun about it is that even when it's a little loose and a little sloppy, you hope we're all on the same journey in that room. We're on our inner journey, but we're all on the same journey too. And so, if something does get a little bit wayward, people laugh and they come with it, So yes is the answer, but you just want to judge it right and get the spaces right. This is another reason, by the way, if you come to my shows, just from a technical point of view, I tend not to sing super duper duper fast songs. Or if I do sing super duper fast song, sometimes we'll employ extra bars, like a couple of bars between one A section and another, because we're trying to give everybody's brain I don't mean a brain to catch up like they need to catch up. Of course they can stay the course. But if there's something lyrically marvelous going on, you want them to savor it. Do you know what I mean? So I'm saying this as part of the whole telling the stories as well as telling the stories in the song. You want it to go at a pace that feels very natural and good so that people can keep up and also take their own time to just step back, close their eyes, and be in their own place. So the space on the canvas is really important too, in both the talking and the singing. All these things are coming into it. And then you get up there and you just let it happen.
Stacey says the great Stacey Kent has been our guest this hour. It's been such a fun hour. If you're in New York City tonight, go check her out if there's any room left in there. And tomorrow night, Saturday night, October 1st and 2nd, pick up the new album, Songs from Other Places, released on Candid Records this month in September. Check her out on Instagram and follow her, Stacey Kent Official. Facebook at Stacey Kent and staceykent.com for all the news and tours and new music. And I hope to see you again, Stacey, here when you've got that new album. And anytime you've got something new, just a pleasure to talk to you. And please say hello to Johnny Valente for us tonight at Birdland Jazz Club, New York City.
I sure will. And I do want to say, for people who might not make it as quick as this, because we only have Friday, Saturday left, we'll be back in December. I think around December 7th for our usual 5-night run. So if they don't make it and they think, oh, I'd like to come to that, December's another opportunity. But I'll go say hi to Johnny right now.
in another hour or so. And this has been great talking to you. Thanks.
Great talking to you so much. And the album has really great songs from other places. We're going to end the show here with Blackbird, and you get to listen to it without any interruption. Communicate, but listen more and evolve. Everybody have a great week. Thank you, Stacey. And I'll say goodbye.